What's good, YouTube? It's me, your boy Squiddy, back again with another video. As we all know, the sneak peek for Photon Hypernova, the new booster pack, is dropping this weekend. And then in a couple of weeks, you might be staring down something along the lines of this against the Kashtira, pure Kashtira deck. Their basically end board is something along the lines of Shangri-La, along with an A-Rise Heart with up to 3 materials on turn 1. 3 of your zones are locked. 1 of your extra deck cards are actually banished as well. And then the top 8 cards of your deck are possibly banished if they have the full combo. In addition to them having a potential Fenrir that's special summoned during your standby phase off the effective Shangri-La. And that's just, this entire thing's off like 2 cards basically. All 1 Unicorn and like any Kashtira extender, you can get this with an A-Rise Heart with 3 materials. I know off just 1 Unicorn, they could even get like a similar board. They don't get, I think A-Rise Heart only has a 1 or 2 materials max instead of the 3 where they can instantly pop off and banish any card on the field face down. But this is like the stereotypical end board that you're going to be seeing, and it's really, really scary if they get to this, if they get this far without stopping them, because of the fact that during your main phase, the first card you activate has to be something that's really, really impactful against this board, because what they can actually do is they can chain a Rise Heart. Say if you activate like an Upstart Goblin, they can chain a Rise Heart, banish your Upstart Goblin face down, and then when it resolves, you draw a card on a new chain, a Rise Heart effect to attach because the card was banished. And then they can also chain Shangri-La because the card was banished face down to lock another one of your zones. And they can also chain Diabolus Mindhacker to banish face down cards equal to the amount of face down cards that you already have banished. So 9 in this case. You would banish the top 9. And then on a new chain, after Mindhacker resolves that entire chain link, Shangri-La is going to activate again because more of your cards were banished face down thanks to the effect of Diabolus, and then they just lock all of your monster zones. So you effectively cannot play the game. So that's why the first card you activate is really, really impactful in this metagame, and I've kind of put together a tier list of the cards so we can really quickly take a look at what cards are good against the Kashtira deck. I put together some popular cards that you guys see in the side that people have been talking about and are good generically. I think we can start off with some of the uglier cards. So the ones that are basically almost unplayable, I would say. Swords of Concealing Light, first and foremost. I know a lot of OCG players were playing this, but I don't think it's that good. I mean, it could float between the playable and the ugly, but for me personally, the problem is, as you saw on that end board, they have an Arise Heart with 3 materials. So if you activate a Swords of Concealing Light, they can just chain the Arise Heart, banish your sword, so their monsters stay face up, because this is a continuous spell card that has to resolve in order to book all their monsters. And then they just lock out your zones with the effect of Shangri-La as well as Mindhacker, and then on new chain Shangri-La again. So I think just because of the fact that they can easily get that end board using a Kashtira Unicorn and any extender, I just think it's not something you really want to play, especially at a tier 1 event where there's like 12 plus rounds and then there's top cut. At some point in time, you're going to wish this was something else, because whenever they have 3 materials on the Ares Heart, this is effectively a dud. So I don't really like this card. I don't know why it's super played in the OCG, but I personally just don't think that you would ever want to play this card over some of the other cards that we have. Other cards are effect negation. So Chalice and Imperm as well. I don't think these cards are very good against Kashtira. On turn 1, you don't really have anything to stop. Yeah, you could use it on Unicorn and just pray they don't have like the extenders, but half the time they probably do, just because everything's at 3 right now. Like the deck's in completely full power, and it's just easy for them to amass any extenders and still build like a decent board. It's kind of awkward because obviously Imperm, you could also hold it for your turn and say use it on like an A-Rise Heart, but again, that doesn't really do anything because your zones are still kind of locked. It's kind of hard to play. I mean, I would say Imperm, if anything, is playable over ugly, but it's just not something that I would recommend being, you know, there are better cards that deal with the board. The only reason why Imperm would slightly be more playable is the fact that it's decent against the other cards in the metagame, so against like Kit Kalos and maybe Flanders, so I think it's all right. Let's talk about some board wipes. Lightning Storm, obviously unplayable because they can easily just put everything in defense mode. A Rise Heart already has 3,000 defense. Shangri-La doesn't have any attack, so it's already going to be automatically in defense mode. And this card just doesn't really do anything. They don't really play a lot of back row. It's not like a Floodgate deck or anything. They might just set like an Imperm or something. If they're playing Adventure, maybe they have like the Fateful Adventure. But it doesn't really do anything to the monsters that are actually impacting your board. So I'm just going to say that one's not really playable. Super Volley is another interesting one. It floats between playable and like ugly, I would say. There are obviously like on their end board, we saw, you know, they have the 2 monsters. So they had like the one they had the 2 dark monsters, so like the Diabolos and then the Ares Heart. It's a machine and a psychic, so you could fuse for Mud Dragon. But the thing is, on their turn, they're already ripping a card out of your extra deck with Eyeballs. So more often than not, they're either going to rip the Zeus or the Mud Dragon, especially if they know you're playing Super Poly, like later in the tournament. They've already seen like what people are playing at the top tables. They have access to information in your deck. They can easily just banish that Mud Dragon, so your Super Poly is just kind of a dud in your hand. So that's why I would say it's like, it's somewhat playable, but we're going to leave it for ugly for now. What else? Yeah, I guess we can talk about some playable cards. So Book of Moon, I would say, is really playable, like these books. Book of Moon, the only problem is it doesn't do enough. It only hits one card again, so you can either book the Shangri-La to unlock your zones, but then you still have to deal with the Arise Heart, which is a walking Macrocosmos. You could book the Macrocosmos, but then, like they still have their zones locked, so it's kind of like a lot of decks can't really play through that. If you're playing a deck that can easily play through that, something like a Sky Striker, you just have to book the Macrocosmos, and then you just need one zone, then sure, this would probably be a lot more playable. It is definitely a card you could side as well going first, because Book of Moon effects largely just end the Kashtira turn on the spot if you just do this on the first monster that they special summon, because they can't use the effect, and then they can also not special summon anymore because they have a locked monster on the field. But if they have something like a Birth plus a normal monster, they could just normal summon the Fenrir and keep playing. But I think it's good, like going first is definitely playable. Same kind of deal with like enemy controller and like some of these thievery effects. So things like change of heart, mind control, enemy controller, they all kind of fulfill the same thing. And the nice thing is you can steal the Arise Heart, and then if you're actually playing the Arise Heart, this is really, really cool. You could overlay for another one of your own Arise Hearts, and then it's permanently yours, because the chances are they actually use the Shangri-La effect during your standby phase to special summon a monster from their deck. And Arise Heart reads if the effect of Shangri-La activated this turn, doesn't matter who controls it, you can overlay it from your deck on top of any Kashtira monster, including itself. So you could just steal it and then use itself as a material to overlay for another copy of Arise Heart. So yeah, that's just something that's really, really cool, I think. You can also, obviously, with Change of Heart and Enemy Controller, you can also just attack. You swing with the Arise Heart and then make a Zeus. That's something else that you can do as well. So these cards are decent, especially going second, I would say. Enemy Controller does have some application going first, but the fact that it steals the monster is kind of bad because it unlocks their monster zone so they can keep playing if they have other names like Fenrir or Unicorn or vice versa. What else? I would say another one that's kind of funny, I thought it was kind of playable, is Brain Control. It's obviously a lot worse than these three, but it's kind of niche because you can actually steal something like a Fenrir if they special summon it, because Fenrir can be normal summons. So you can steal the Fenrir and then try and swing with Fenrir and banish something. Obviously, it baits out the Arise Heart. It's decently good if they only have one material on the Arise Heart, because then it'll obviously the Brain Control gets banished, so they put another material. But then they just have two materials, so they can't deal with the Fenrir, and you can just banish something. But more often than not, they probably can. So this is more like a cutesy option that I thought was kind of funny, and it's at 3. The new errata, by the way, is you pay 800, you can only steal a monster that can be normal summoned or sat. So that's why you can't steal XYZ. So it's a lot worse, I would say. But it's just a funny little option that you can kind of deal with. Other board wipes that are a little bit better, I would say Dark Hole, and also to an extension Raigeki. I totally forgot to put it on here, but Dark Hole and Raigeki are decent ones. They're playable. It deals with the board. It deals with one of the major problems, which is the Arise Heart, but then they keep the Shangri-La because it can protect itself by detaching a material, so your zones are still locked. So it really depends on the type of deck that you're playing. If you're playing a deck that can kind of, make some combo plays with two or less zones, then Dark Hole becomes a lot better because you're just getting rid of the major problem card in the Arise Heart, but then you're dealing with the Shangri-La with your other options, with a limited amount of monster zones. So that's something you consider. Same with Raigeki. Dark Hole is also a lot, I would say, marginally better than Raigeki at the moment, depending on the deck you're playing, because a lot of people are playing that level 2 Ibli. So when they summon it on your field, you cannot special summon except by Link. And then, a lot of decks that do that, if you normal summon something, they're going to deal with your normal summon, so you can't play for the rest of your turn. So this can be cross-sided for decks that do play Ibli, and then you could just activate Dark Hole to clear the board, including their Ibli, so you can start playing again. Other things that are also playable, Dark Ruler, it's kind of similar to Dark Hole. The nice thing about Dark Ruler is it actually unlocks your zones because it negates the effects of the Shangri-La. It actually doesn't unlock the zones. The other thing I want to mention. So it's actually a lot worse. I realized if you negate the effects, so same thing with Imperm and Chalice, it actually doesn't unlock your zones. So you're still locked with 3. But the nice thing is that it actually deals with Arise Heart, so you can start playing. But then like they still have the monster on the board. So like would just a board breaker just be better than this? But the other nice thing about this is it has crossover against matchups like Sprite, you know, where they're playing these huge, totally awesome boards that you can't really deal with a board wipe. And then Dark Ruler just comes in clutch because it deals with like, you know, 4 or 5 of their negations, you know, with the usage of one card. So that's really, really nice. You have to think about a lot of other matchups when you are siding because this format does have a lot of other rogue decks. It's basically like Tournaments, Kashtira, and then a bunch of world decks. So having crossover is always really, really important in my opinion. What else? Moving on to the good. Another book that we have here, Book of Lunar Eclipses. Discard 1 card, target 2 monsters, exactly 2 on the field, and then book them face down. This is obviously really, really good. If you have a deck that can afford the discard, a lot of decks can't really afford that. You know, even in tournaments, you can discard like a card, but the first discard that you're discarding is going to get banished by the Erase Heart, so you're not getting any value out of the discard half the time. You're just going like 2 for 2, kind of like you're booking their 2 monsters and you're losing 2 cards. So I would say like this is a lot better in a deck that can actually make use of the discards because when you know, want to side it going in first, for example, you can actually make usage of the discard. But the drawback is kind of heavy that you have to target exactly 2 and not up to 2. So you would have to target one of your own monsters in addition to the special summon monster that they special summon as their first action. So it's just something to consider. I do like it a little better than Book of Moon in the sense that it deals with 2 monsters. So you can book the Shangri-La and the Arise Heart. So you clear your zones and then you also negate, well, you turn off the Arise Heart. So that's why I kind of like it more than the Book of Moon. Same thing with Lava Golem and Spear Mode. Spear Mode obviously deals with that board that, you know, their end board they set up. More often than not, they're probably going to use Shangri-La to special summon unless they want to play around something. I don't know, like they play around like Change of Heart maybe so you can't overlay for your own Rise Heart. Like half the time I think it's still better to special summon from your deck. So this would probably always be live. Same thing with Lava Golem, but the drawback is you can't normal summon. So if you have a deck that's heavily reliant on normal summoning, these cards are just not as good. But if you have a deck that can, you know, play through like with a lot of extenders, doesn't really care about the normal summons, maybe even in the mirror match, these would probably be decently good because you can just get rid of your opponent's board, then set up your own board, clear the Lava Golem, and then you're in because you get rid of their board. Oh, we actually forgot about Evenly. I would say this is marginally playable. The problem is they can keep the Arise Heart, which is like the bigger problem for most of the decks. So obviously you unlock your zones, but then you're still kind of staring down a a walking macrocosmos. You can't really do anything in that regard. And then the good, I would say Book of Eclipse. We already know this card is really good. It doesn't really have any drawbacks aside from the fact of your opponent drawing at the end phase if you are unable to clear the board, so you're probably going to lose. It's a little worse defensively as well because you obviously book your opponent's monster and then they flip up and they draw. But it's still really good enough. You know, we talked about Book of Moon, booking your opponent's first action. So if you're going first and they summon a Fenrir and you just book it, more often than not, they just pass their turn. But the other drawback is it also books all the monsters on field. So your own monsters, like if you have a board, they'll all be booked face down as well. So that's kind of bad. And then the other thing to note is that this can be negated by Ash Blossom because the drawing effect is all part of the booking effect. So they can respond with Ash Blossom to negate the entire effect. So that's kind of rough, I would say, but it's still one of the cleaner options because you don't have to discard. You don't really have to lose anything. You can still normal summon. You don't really have, it's not really like reliant on certain things. It's a quick play spell. You can chain it to things. You can use it on your draw phase before they special summon off of Shangri-La, which is really, really important. So I think this is probably one of the cleaner answers. It's just a 1 card. It's not reliant on anything. You can draw it as your 6th card and it's live. So I think this is probably the best option we have right now. And then the other option is Nibiru. This is obviously only good when you draw it going second and you're opening 5. It's useless if you go and draw it for your 6th card. But it's really good because they don't really have a way to deal with it. If the player is like decent and their hand is good, they have a lot of extenders. One thing they can do is actually hard open. They can hard overlay for the Arise Heart as their first action with 3 level 7s. And then if you happen to nib later on in their combo, they can just special summon another Kashtira on the board and then overlay that the hard way using the effect of Shangri-La. So like, I guess I would go Shangri-La, then overlay for like Arise Heart with 3 materials. I thought an OCG player, I can't remember how he did it, but he did like overlaid with 3 materials to play around Nib. And then I think he got nibbed like some point during his play, and then he could use the last remaining Kashtira that he special summoned back with like the Birth, I think, to overlay for a Rise Heart. So you still kind of have to deal with your Rise Heart. I'm not sure like if their hand just has to be godlike for that. I know you would have to have a lot of extenders, so this card more often than not just deals with the board. But I would say Book of Eclipse is still a lot better because this is obviously just like a little more of a brick, you know, going second. It's not really that good, but it does have a lot of more crossover matchups against things like Sprite. It's still decently playable. Maybe against Tier Elements it's also playable if you happen to play a lot of Bystials, because you can actually just banish their Kick Hallows in response to their second name activation. Then they can't special summon Rook Hallows easily, so your Nibiru is always live at the end of their entire combo, so you can use it at the end of the main phase, just clear the board. But I would say Book of Eclipse is still the best option at this moment in time. I don't know if I missed anything. If you guys have any other suggestions, let me know what is other good options to beat the Kashtira deck, because it's a lot different here than it is in the OCG. In the OCG, they have things like Maxi and just like a bunch of different options, and the game's a lot different here. We have different metagames. Tier limits are still a thing, you know. So are there any cards that are better against the tier limits matchup as well? Let me know in the comments below, and rate, comment, subscribe if you guys haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.